Welcome to Focused Fire Chat. Explore together.
Welcome back for the 18th installment of our Extra Lore series, recorded live on September 6, 2017, over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. Big shout out to our live chat here. Thank you so much for taking a momentary break from the Destiny 2 hype and spending your evening with us. Our topic for this chat is going to be an introductory look into the Final Fantasy series. This is your host, Blue Crew 86. Justin is actually taking the night off tonight. He is in the middle of actually picking up and moving physically, so he's wrapping that up right now. And Mel, I spoke with Mel earlier tonight. She had a emergency work schedule kind of come up. She was going to be on tonight, but be sure to let her know that we miss her and that we're giving her support over on Twitter at The Wind of the Stars. Her life is still kind of pretty hectic. The cosplay situation has calmed down. Now she's fighting that whole work schedule that all of us love to fight. But we do have our resident Gunter extraordinaire, Green-Eyed Music Lover. Green, I hope you're ready for the shenanigans. What are your thoughts on the topic tonight? I know you have some.
So I started out last month really excited about okay, I'm going to get into every single one of these. Yes. I'm going to watch somebody's rundown on it. Because it's related to Kingdom Hearts. And Julie's playing that right now. And she's gotten 25 hours into it already. So I'm yeah, I'm going to learn about the background of it. I got through, I think I watched 8. There's this one really good YouTuber who does 2-hour long episodes about them. And I got 1 through 8 finished and I went,
I mean, you should not have watched the one for the Final Fantasy that shall not be named.
Oh, well, okay. I don't say I really watched that one.
Good.
I kind of more snoozed through it a little bit. Because I just kind of...
I mean, the game that literally almost destroyed Squaresoft.
Yes.
They almost declared bankruptcy after that. Sony had to bail them out.
Yeah. Yep. It was interesting, but I'm excited to hear your guys' take on it.
I love the fact that she started off the conversation with, I was really excited a month ago.
You should have talked to me, Green. I would have been watch the ones for this one, and that one. There's so many you should skip. No. 1, 2, and 3, you don't need to do. 8, nobody should have to suffer.
1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3 made sense to me because it's there's a connecting theme going on.
There isn't, though.
There is.
No.
There is.
No.
There is.
Then you watch the tinfoil hat guy.
No, I did not watch the tinfoil hat guy.
Yeah.
No, we haven't done a video on it yet. We haven't. This is our video on it. So we haven't. The tinfoil hat series hasn't gone out yet.
There are arguably 2 Final Fantasies that are connected, and that's 1 and 9.
They're not connected world-wise. I meant theme-wise.
I mean, they're all connected theme-wise. It's just an evolving theme as the game's gone along.
Right.
I was talking more about the concept of the crystals?
Yeah. Those exist all the way up to 5.
Yeah. Which is why I was they have a connection. This makes more sense to me. And then after that, they went, no, not so much.
Then kind of. We'll get there.
Okay. Well, teach me, because I am still very frustrated about the whole situation.
Well, so we can kind of describe the connections. The crystal thing sort of evolves into a different concept called, it sort of changes, and by 11 is the first one, 12 is the first one that doesn't really truck with it, but in 6 through 10 it's more maybe 10 doesn't either, but it becomes a concept called magicite, or there's other stones that sort of have the same thing but are sort of a lower tier and more spread out.
That's right. It seems to take on this different the 2 different things between either crystals or magicite. Those are the 2 common themes that you see, 2 common tropes often within Final Fantasy, definitely.
And
I'm going to stop you real quick before Blue gets any more hey, I haven't done my job. But I do have questions. I have leading questions, so just hold up on me.
Wait, well, let me say one more thing about the theme.
Oh, okay.
Is that is that 5 is a very different game, and there's a reason why I think that the game shifts modes after that, and we can get into that towards the end. But I think that the theme continues, and 5 is the reason for its change. But we can get there later.
So the mysterious voices that you're hearing. Yeah. That's what I was like. I was like, let me introduce you guys, and then I'll get out of your way.
No,
I'll get completely out of the way.
No introduce, only fight.
Right.
So, of course, for these topics, we always want to make sure we have someone or a couple of people who are well-versed in the lore. So with that being said, I want to welcome our 2 guest co-hosts. First, we have one of our chat moderators and a returning guest co-host, Damoel. Damo, how's everything going for you tonight?
Fantastic. It's my birthday.
Oh, hey! Yeah, that's
birthday.
right. I forgot you got Destiny 2 for your birthday. I forgot that.
Yeah. It's pretty much the greatest birthday present Bungie could have given me.
Nice.
Yay.
Seriously. They did that specifically for you. All the promo material was September 8th, and then they were like, oh, wait, we got to fix that.
I in fact remember that. I was in Focus Fire when that got announced, and I was like, holy crap, they literally moved it on to my birthday.
Yeah, because I got one of the little Cade promos from GameStop. They're like giving away all the cardboard stuff because they're it's over for them the big whatever go live thing, and it's one of the ones that says September 8th, and I was like, that's actually even funnier. Like I was like, this is pretty cool. So can you let people know real quick where to find you and what got you into Final Fantasy?
You can find me on Twitter at Damoel, or you can check out my Destiny Spinfoil podcast, Rabbit Hole Radio. And I first got into Final Fantasy when I rented it on a whim, Final Fantasy IV. I played Final Fantasy 1 and I enjoyed it, but like when I rented 4 and I played through it, I was pretty young at the time, but I think I still stayed up for like 36 or 37 hours, and I didn't stop until I'd beaten it.
Nice.
And I was actually playing a copy that is kind of rare. For people who don't know, Final Fantasy IV, when it was brought over, was easy-ified for the American audience, but there was a small release that wasn't that way. And so I played one of those, and so the final boss fight took me, I think, 7.5 hours of pounding on my head against the wall till I could beat it.
Dang.
But I was so into the story, I had to see it through. So, and that's pretty much when the addiction started, and it never stopped.
In some psychological circles, that's actually a problem. We might need to talk some counseling if it's that abusive of a relationship.
I mean, it was
battered
love tap. It was friendly love taps.
Right.
It's fine.
Battered gamer syndrome. Battered gamer syndrome is a real thing.
It's
okay. God. So next,
battered mentality, but sure.
Next up is a great friend of ours and someone I understand to be a huge fan of this particular subject, BeardGrizzly. Mm-hmm. Beard, how's everything going for you tonight?
Oh, it's going, outside of the fact that I've had about 3 hours sleep in the last almost 4 days.
Hey.
So I'm pretty well. I'm pretty well hopped up on caffeine. And
are you a content creator or something? I don't.
I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure if that's the case, but
I forgot.
I think I'm kind of faking it, if nothing else. Like, what is life at the moment?
Why can I see sounds?
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna say what? Wait a minute. What is this code that I see? I didn't know I was a robot.
That's a thing.
Oh man. Well, how about you? Can you let us know where people can find you and what got you into Final Fantasy?
Sure. I can be found pretty well anywhere that you can type beard_grizzly. That'll actually be on either YouTube, Twitch. You can also find me on Twitter there. Plenty of other places in terms of where I am. I've got my own website now, too, just beardgrizzly.com.
Nice.
Trying to keep up with that as best as I can. That is actually a huge, huge undertaking because I'm trying to put my scripts up there now, too, for you guys.
Cool.
Anyway, cover
Nice.
a bunch of Destiny lore if you're not familiar with me. I am very spinfoily. Very. Did I mention that the spinfoil hat may as well have been put into Destiny 2 because of me?
Oh, I saw that.
That's not true.
I saw that tweet and I was like, "Oh, that is so awesome!"
Oh my god! As soon as I saw that, I was like, "That needs to be on my head like all the time." I will not wear a helmet in combat zones just so I can wear that. I'm totally fine with this.
Uh-huh.
But what got me into Final Fantasy comes down to a few different things. One, I've always been a very story-oriented person, and when I had... I should kind of say it here first, because I didn't get into Final Fantasy until Final Fantasy VII. And that was kind of a very popular realm for a lot of people because it was what Sony was really kind of hyping it up to be. I didn't own a SNES when I was younger, so for me, when I saw FF7, I was like, that looks amazing! And as soon as I heard you could have like over 100 hours in the game, I was like, I need this. So I started with that, and it kind of just built from there. But long story short, I loved the character designs, the models, and stuff like that. That's what interested me more than anything. But afterward, it started to be this idea of the storytelling that's in here is more related to stuff of life, and that's kind of just panned back to me as like a younger kid, as like there's a lot I can kind of relate to with these characters, even though they're in a fantasy realm. And it's this interesting storytelling that they kind of have had throughout the entire series. And I didn't realize that until like, I think another 5 years later when I started to backtrack and find out they did this a lot more than just that. So that's what got me interested in it. I just started digging into it even further.
Awesome. Well, let's run through the intro real quick, and then I'm just going to kind of step out of the way and let the two of you explain to us what we don't know.
You can say if I like cats and dogs.
Yeah,
yes,
or that too. I mean, I have a bucket of water, so if it gets a little too calm, I'll just throw that in there and see what happens. Right? Isn't that how that works?
So what you're saying is for the puppies.
Yes, for the puppies. We're gonna struggle.
Man myself, but
all right, let's run through the intro real fast. Before we start off the chat, however, I do have a few housekeeping notes. In our last Extra Lore episode, we discussed the Horizon Zero Dawn series. If you missed that and have any interest in hearing our thoughts, please be sure to check out the new www.focusfirechat.com for archives of all previous chats, links to the other aspects of Focus Fire Chat out in the internet, and a growing collection of community articles. If you don't mind, please give us some feedback on iTunes to let us know how we're doing, as well as helping us continue to grow. As many of you already know, Focus Fire Chat is a cross-community gathering, where the intent is to offer a week-long, in-depth view of a particular subject from within the lore of Destiny and other games. With the Extra Lore series, we delve into a game series other than Destiny for a full month, giving the group a chance to get a feel for the other games that our community loves to play. We try to stream a recap of this month-long conversation in the first week of each month. Please be sure to also give some support to the other podcasts in the Guardian Radio Network, found at theguardiansofdestiny.com. These include Guardian Radio, the first and longest-running Destiny podcast on the net, Guardian 1, Ghosts and Echoes, which also has the Destiny audio grimoire from Destiny 1, and the network's newest edition, a non-Destiny podcast, Paragon Radio. Our next Extra Lore is going to be a discussion on the lore of the DC Universe. Never let it be said that we shy away from immense subjects. So be sure to jump into the Discord server and weigh in. With that, Damo, would you kindly start us off with a general summary on the information that we have about Final Fantasy?
Well, I mean, it's pretty in depth.
And go. Okay.
Yeah, really.
Beard, maybe you could summarize it easier than I can.
Oh no!
Yeah, I'm gonna ship this back to you. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. All of a sudden, it's like Jay's just like, and Damo, why don't you tell us about what's going on with Final Fantasy? And he's like, Beard, get me out of this one, quick.
Yeah, pretty much.
Play me off, Johnny. No. So the whole understanding with Final Fantasy, the biggest thing is that it's generally a typical hero versus villain setup in a way, but it starts to be more of a group, and within that group is generally these different personalities that end up forming, so on and so forth. It's been a common trait that you see in a lot of new games today. But basically, that villain has something that they effectively want to either end time, end the world, end whatever there might be about what exists on the planet. Basically, just an all alternative evil. And then you have the few guys that are there to say, well, no, that's stupid, and we're going to fight you and kill you and stuff. And it stems out further, though, because you get introspective with the characters that exist. I had mentioned Final Fantasy VII originally already. So to look at something like that, you get a character like Cloud, who's actually a lot more... He has more depth to him than you think he does. And once you get to the revelations about everything that's happening, and you start to realize that he may not necessarily be the most important character, it's this thing that Square Enix has carried on further and further into a lot of their other games. It paints this picture of, and especially with Final Fantasy, it paints this picture that every character that is within this game is that important. And at least for me, it's always been about the characters. It has always been about what those characters do, how they develop, and so on. But again, if you end up just kind of bringing it down to the basics, it's basically heroes versus villains, and villain just wants to be a complete jerk.
So they usually I will say, because there's one or two exceptions, they usually actually have fairly compelling and interesting stories and reasons why they're seeking what they're seeking.
Yes.
Because I would definitely say that deep villains, outside of the first few, very much personify the game.
Yes. Yeah, it's as funny as it is that you brought up DC, it's kind of like why I continue to read Batman or something like that. I care more about the villain a lot of the time than I do necessarily about most of the other characters.
Yeah.
But even then, there are those characters within Final Fantasy that are very anti-hero. I would call Final Fantasy X and Auron as an example.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't necessarily care too much about FF10 as much as a lot of people want to punch me in the face for that one.
I forgive you.
But I loved Auron as a character.
Auron's one of the best characters in the history of Final Fantasy.
Yeah, he was the saving grace to Final Fantasy X, period. There is so few otherwise that are... how can you...
Beginning to unforgive you. Beginning to unforgive you.
Whatever. No, like in reality, like you have Final Fantasy X, and then all of a sudden you have a character like Auron who's in there, and it's like, how did this guy get paired up with the rest of this squad?
Well, I mean, that's
from a design standpoint, it's like,
of the
what the heck
story.
happened?
It's like literally the whole point of the story.
Right.
We'll get to that one, because I'm definitely going to go into detail on 10, because it's my favorite.
Please, can we not?
No, I said we're going to fight, and I knew that we were going to fight, so we're going to fight.
Okay.
Well, okay. When we get to Final Fantasy Tactics, you can wake me up.
Wow. Okay, so bad guys versus good guys. Generally, the good guys are in a group. Am I understanding?
Yeah, it's pretty much always a group effort.
Usually.
So it's like a squad. It's always a squad based presentation, right?
Yeah, there's never been a game where you have a single player. So
put it this way: if you actually were able to take Cade, Ikora, and Zavala out of the tower and make them somewhat useful, then that is what that would be.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
In the first few games, the initial group is very kind of light. Whereas by the later ones, it's less that way, and there's a lot more depth to it.
Yes.
Right. There was one that had some sort of time traveling thing going on. The one that I fell asleep in kind of had a time traveling thing in it.
I love the collective groan.
8 is... Probably we're just not going to talk about that much unless Beard, for some reason, likes it, because that game is just a mess.
All right, hang on. I'm going to say one quick story about Final Fantasy VIII, and that's that a good friend of mine used to argue that it was better than most of the other Final Fantasies out there because it was a single story. And I was like, that's your reasoning? You're not going to look at Final Fantasy 6 or 4 or 3 or 5 or even 9. You're going to say that 8 is a better game than most of the others? Okay, that's fine.
I mean, it's got an ardent fan base of people who really, really, really enjoy it, and I mean, that's cool for them. But they're.
Is that the one where there's like this witch type character?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. It's the one I'm thinking of then.
Yeah, and it devolves into this just.
I mean, there's a moment halfway through the game or something where the characters are like, "Oh yeah, we all grew up at the same orphanage together," and then the villain was the orphan mother. Like that actually happens. They just all of a sudden sort of remember this.
I went when I was
at the 11th hour.
To it. Yeah, when I was listening to that, I went, "Huh? Why?"
That seems like
Not
to mention, but the magic system is one of the best systems ever designed, and in it, you will sit there and in a fight and continually hit this one button to get the spell out of the enemy over and over and over and over. That's all you do. That's your whole game right there. Is for hours.
Mashing?
Yeah, it may as well be. Yes, with a command code, not the fact that it's a button mash. It's the fact that you're selecting the same command over and over again.
So it's Pokemon before Pokemon.
Basically, Final Fantasy is effectively that idea, but as silly as it is, I would say that Pokemon was better structured in terms of its fighting mechanics than Final Fantasy VIII ever could stand to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, at least in Pokemon, you don't do that. You don't do that all the time, and you don't you can stop doing that from early on if you really want, right? You can catch your full team of Pokemon and you're done.
Right.
You can never approach that again. That is not true in Final Fantasy because you will eventually run out of spells.
And I would just like to state that we went from a tangent to Pokemon from Final Fantasy VIII because that's how much anybody could ever care about that game.
Pretty much.
Okay, so. After striking a nerve like that, we were talking.
That was a nerve strike.
I know.
It definitely was.
I was trying to think. Okay, so we went from earlier. We were talking about the crystals.
Yes.
And there went from a crystals to a totally. What was the other magic system that you were talking about?
They kind of decentralize it and make magicite, which is basically like crystallized magic and often associated with particularly powerful beings.
Right. Most notably some of the dragons, right?
Well, the summons in general.
Espers are the common one where you start to hear about stuff like Magitech, Magicite,
Mm-hmm. And
so
wasn't that it's Final Fantasy 3 or something like that where that comes in, or 4?
6.
6, okay.
Yeah, it's the start.
So this is a world that has magic, just to make sure everyone catches that.
Most of them do, yeah.
Well, and I guess that's the question is, so even bigger picture summary, is Final Fantasy all taking place in the same world or same universe?
We don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now, okay. No, go for it.
You could argue that point implicitly, and there is definitely a couple theories that I know that have been swimming out there for years, kind of with the thought that it at least takes place on 2 worlds, or at least a few worlds that are kind of interconnected, and that stems back actually to 2 very big characters, or 3 if you really want to drag it out, and that's the villain of Final Fantasy V, which is Exdeath, and then also the Dark Cloud, which is the major full villain in Final Fantasy III, and then also Genova, who isn't necessarily the full villain in Final Fantasy VII, but pretty close. Effectively,
it's hard to find a villain in Final Fantasy VII. Honestly, it's kind of a weird story.
Right, I gotta say, everybody's effectively a villain in a.
Aeris is pure and did nothing wrong.
Yes, right, totally.
I'm not going to argue with them.
Man, I will fly over there and slap you. You can leave my precious flower seller alone.
Sure.
Okay, so isn't there a character, a recurring named Gilgamesh that's kind of somewhat a anti-hero type character every once in a
Gilgamesh
while.
is kind of a weird character, but he's not necessarily like you can think about him as recurring, but you can't necessarily think about him as connecting.
Okay.
Like there's no actual proof that it's the same Gilgamesh or related.
Yeah.
Same thing with the what is it?
Like Ultros shows up in a lot of them too, but it's just kind of a joke. My theory is actually that yes, the universes are all connected, and I actually have like a really crazy spin-foily theory that basically, as the games went on, they decided they were kind of going to go backwards. Because if you look at the Final Fantasies, one of the things you very quickly see is that there's these ancient civilizations that have huge technological advances over where you're going, right? It's a big theme in Final Fantasy 1, right? You have to go find the airship, and then you find this glimmering tower that looks all futuristic and decked out. And so my theory has always been that there are Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, and 4 take place in one world, or one combination of worlds. 5 actually has this weird thing where there's two worlds that kind of get bricked together by the villain. Yeah. And so that's my theory also why crystals stop existing then.
Right. Well, don't they end up like they have anti-crystals or like dark crystals?
In 4 they
5
do.
Or 4?
Yeah. 4. And that also gets kind of wonky and like can kind of still work with 3, 2, and 1 not having that because of what happens to the crystals sort of at the end of 4. Yes. Which has one of the most absurdly twisty stories, but is still freaking amazing.
So weird, isn't that the one? That one.
So I'll go over 4 really quick. Okay. So, like, the basic premise of 4 is that ages ago there was this really huge civilization on the moon that was super advanced in like magic and technology, and they kind of looked down at the Earth and realized there was a huge potential for them to kind of screw everything up down there. And one guy in particular was sort of aiming at that. He's like, we're superior to these people, so we should just control them and dominate them, and they should be our servants. And so like they all locked themselves into like cryosleep, except for one that was supposed to keep an eye out and make sure nothing bad happened to them.
Okay.
And then the villain himself actually wakes himself up and escapes, but while that guy is kind of off, literally philandering on Earth. And so that all happens, and then your character you grew up an orphan in this kingdom, and like the king kind of took you in, so you really respect him, and you kind of listen to what he says, and he's kind of guiding you on this path that gets increasingly dark, and then sends you on this mission where you end up murdering a lot of people unbeknownst to you, like you didn't know it was going to happen, and you end up deciding that you're going to take him down, and you find out that he's not the king, he's been kind of replaced by this evil spirit.
Who happens to be like the brother of somebody or something?
I'll get there.
Okay.
So that king hires a guy that takes over your position when he kind of fires you. And that guy is just the worst. Like, he goes around killing people, torching nations, doing all this crazy stuff. Long story short, that spirit guy from the moon kind of came to Earth and took over your brother, Golbez. That's the guy who took the reins after you, and sort of led him into doing all of this awful stuff. Yeah. And so you sort of have to like cleanse yourself of the king's influence and sort of achieve your destiny. And in doing so, you actually like kind of refuse to kill your brother and sort of pull him away from the corruption. And then you go back and you kick the ever-loving crap out of this dark force that's sort of been polluting everything. And then your brother and the other guy decide they're going to go back to sleep, and you kind of head back to try to fix the world that this, giant jerk completely ruined or tried to.
Yeah.
It was really confusing to watch that one too.
The games are tough to watch, like Let's Plays and stuff, because like honestly, they're dense, right? Like if you're not actually like playing through it at the appropriate pace, like there are things you don't want to make more dense if you can avoid it.
Well, that and so that's 4.
Yeah.
Isn't the one that you were talking about that has the two worlds bricked together was also
that's 5.
Incredibly confusing, especially towards
highly.
You think it's gonna end, and then there's this whole other subplot going on, and it's like, what?
Nope.
Huh? Why? You had a perfectly good story. Why aren't you finishing?
I mean, Final Fantasy tends to, like, Square in general likes to weave stories together. If you ever really want to screw your brain up and see them, like, their storytelling at its apex, and by that I actually mean that it's one of the best stories I think ever created, go read the story for a game called Xenogears.
Mm-hmm.
Xenogears.
It's one of the most convoluted stories, but it's fantastic. It's basically at the shortest, like a 60 to 70 hour game, and it's Square's opus, in my opinion.
Okay.
But yeah, they like weaving deep, complicated stories. And one thing that I also really respect and love about them is that they really like, they really like leaving stuff up to interpretation. They very rarely give you every detail.
Yeah, I noticed.
Which I think is one of the best things about Destiny, actually, is that they do the same thing, right? There are whole portions of the world that you're left to fill in a little bit by yourself because they want you to. And I think that's actually pretty cool.
Okay, can we go over what happened in Final Fantasy when it came to the US releases versus the Japanese releases? Because that, I mean, I understand it.
Like how the numbering sequence ended up working out, is that what you mean?
The Asian release is 6 in Japan, but
so it's actually pretty simple. So they didn't have confidence in Final Fantasies 2 and 3 for an American audience, basically at all. Mm-hmm. So they didn't want to release them. So they basically skipped over those, and then when the Super Famicom was coming out and they made Final Fantasy IV, they decided that they were going to push it over to America, which is the first time they intentionally did that. FF1 coming over was kind of like a touch and go thing for a long time, and obviously they're glad they did because it sold even better over here than it did in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
but so there was a big stigma, and it was somewhat deserved against American audiences, in which like challenge was not at all desired, and the Japanese philosophy on design was the opposite. Right. Like they really wanted their games to be tough and punishing, and like you had to work for it, and Americans didn't buy those games very much. So that's one reason why they didn't want to. They just didn't think they could bring 2 and 3 over. And so when they brought 4 over, they decided they didn't want to call it 4 out of the blue, so they called it 2, and then they skipped 5 as well for reasons. And then they did 6 as 3.
And then they caught up eventually. Like now we're
they abandoned that numbering structure for 7.
Okay.
Because basically it stopped having a point. Because too many people were onto it, as it were.
Yep.
Okay.
Too many people were like
the world of the internet started to really pick into everything, which was part of it. Secondarily was just Sony, like I had mentioned earlier, was 7. They started to really, really make it more popularized. But as soon as we started seeing a lot of the Japanese commercials that got posted, we were like, why is it named 7? Because they actually were trying to call it 4 over here originally. They completely hogwashed it really quick. But it was something that they ended up finding, well, suddenly we've got all these other games that you don't know about, and now people wanted to start to play those.
Okay.
But yeah, that's basically where
we got them in some remakes.
Yeah, because they had Origins and they had anthologies that they ended up bringing to PlayStation 1. Basically shortly after, I think like a year after they started to release those. With the PlayStation 1. And we also got the Chrono Trigger version on PlayStation as well. So a couple of those things... RPG. Yes. So a couple of these ended up just merging together, and we ended up eventually over in the United States getting all of them. And we were just kind of like, wow, we should have had these a lot sooner. But admittedly, something like Final Fantasy V early on probably would not have sold very well over here. I would at least argue that to a heavy point, but I think 3 would have done very well over here.
Okay.
I think 5 could have potentially, but it would have taken a lot of work to make it into something I think that fit well. And they didn't want to do that, and they still haven't. Right, the ports and translations we've gotten they're not bad,
terrible.
But they're. I mean, yeah, it definitely loses something in translation, even with the best of them. The fan translation I originally played is still the best one. But I mean, that was
as far as like the story goes and like what I would be interested in, I really liked the 1 through 4 structure as far as it was not a simple story by any stretch, but at the same time it wasn't it didn't feel like it was so disjunct. And a lot of the later stories feel very M. Night Shyamalan.
They're actually not, though. They're tough to describe, and they're tough to see in a short video, but like they don't have that issue when you sort of see them in game, right? Outside of the wonder reveal in 8 that we've already discussed, I feel like most of the stories are fairly coherent.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say even with Final Fantasy VII and like the reveal of what happened with Cloud had more semblance and thought behind it. It was missing that one cutscene that shouldn't have been hidden, and I think it would have answered so many other questions.
Yeah, like I would say that it's vaguely rough, but it still makes sense.
A lot more sense than freaking FF8, that's for sure. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Can we go over what said cutscene was?
Oh my goodness, do you really want me to do this? Because this is a conversation and a half.
I'm sure.
Yeah, let's wait for 7s. Let's
Yes.
So let's illustrate, I think, the ones that we're probably going to hit the most.
Okay.
I think 4, 6, 7, and 10 are probably our best bets for the big callouts.
And tactics. Don't forget tactics. Please don't forget tactics.
We'll do tactics is amazing.
We'll do tactics. Yeah, tactics is the best offering.
It really is.
Oh,
and by that I mean War of the Lions, not its ill considered brethren.
Yeah, I was going to say, we stop at tactics. We're not going past that.
Yeah. But we'll give tactics something. I say we do that at the end because I think that's probably where we're going to start rambling and just sort of chatting endlessly. And that way Blue can just cut us off when he needs to.
Fair enough.
But I think those are probably the best ones to discuss, other than maybe a little bit on 5 to continue what we've sort of been doing.
Right.
But
and I would probably say, with 5, to me, I never connected very well with the story because I think I was in the same position you were actually in, Green. I felt it was very disconjointed, and I just really lost it somewhere. I liked the characters. I loved Bart's and everybody, but
5's translation is just bad. When I say we talk about 5, I mostly mean I do think that the two worlds being bricked together is pretty hugely relevant in Final Fantasy, so we'll probably come back to that, but I don't think it needs its own.
Yeah. No. I think that the major plot points to pull for the bigger games that everybody kind of likes to talk about would be in 5 with the two worlds joined. Now all of a sudden Final Fantasy VI pops up and the argument is, well, this world doesn't necessarily have magic before and now it does.
Final Fantasy VI is a game about two worlds, which is why I think it's particularly relevant. Because in it, there's two distinct worlds, right? There's this world where magic exists, and these Esper things live, and it's pretty, it's pretty grand and wonderful for all of them. And then there's this secondary world where we live.
Is it really grand? Because aren't they siphoning off of them? I mean,
no. Their world is grand, and then people sort of discover how it works, and everything sort of gets not grand, and it's all kind of bad for them.
And then Kefka.
Yeah, the worst villain in the history of villains.
I would say best worst.
By I mean worst. I mean like the most horrific.
Yes.
That. We'll get into that.
Oh my god!
I will rant loudly about that villain because I think he's one of the most prime examples of reckless, vile evil in the history of gaming.
First off, if anybody wants to have a little background music, just go on YouTube Dancing Mad for a little while and just let that play in the background because you will have nightmares just listening to that.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Final Fantasy VI just has so many different takes and different feels behind it simply because the character structure as well. It was one of the first ones, in my opinion, where all of the characters realistically had a meaning and mattered. You really didn't feel like there was one of them that was a main character, if you will. Like there was no quote unquote main character. Yes, Terra was hugely important, and she was the first one you saw.
Terra is the central character, but you can't call her the main character.
No, like she's a focal point simply for the fact that she's like half Esper, and that's the important.
And how the whole conflict started too.
Right, like
she's the central figure.
Didn't she not know she was Esper?
We don't really know because she doesn't really know her background very well at the start of the game. She basically raised,
doesn't have time to explain why she doesn't have time to explain.
She's raised as a slave, and she doesn't know. She doesn't really know much about herself, and she's basically wearing this device, this magical technological device that sort of makes that all worse.
Yeah.
And so like she discovers her past throughout the game, which I actually think is one reason why that game is so amazing.
Yes, because
it's one of the first examples of that in gaming, and I think that's one of the most important storytelling elements that has come out of gaming. Because like in a book, you don't you have time to tell the character's story outside of the actual story if you want, right? You can do flashbacks or your whatever, right? There's tons of tricks to do it, but in a video game where the players are actually like engaging with the story, it's tough to do that if they're not paying attention. So having a protagonist that literally doesn't know her own story and is learning it as you play is, I think, a stroke of genius.
Yeah, right. I gotta say, and they not to dwell on it too much, but they do kind of carry that over into 7 as well, which I think was great.
I think it's good in 7, but it's better executed in 6.
It's highly better executed in 6. Like I will still say, in my opinion, of the numbered Final Fantasies, I still say that 6 is the best of them.
I think 6 is objectively the best Final Fantasy game. And Tactics I do not consider to be a true Final Fantasy game. That's not a disparaging thing on it. It's just, it's a side game, for sure.
Yes. There's elements that link with it, but no, it's not a Final Fantasy game.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. Where does that leave us with 6? Because I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's like hugely important.
So okay, I know, and we were talking a little bit about recurring characters and kind of the world basis and how there's magic and stuff like that. But I noticed that once you get past a certain point in the games, you go from having a very magic based, almost Tolkien or Zelda like feel, to having a very steampunk, and it goes super steampunk for a long time.
And again, that happens around the same time of 5.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
5 doesn't really have much of that. It has a little bit, and then 6 is where you really see that technology coming in, which lends more to my theory as well.
Yeah. So yes, 6 is basically the portion where everything does kind of take over. I think on the steampunk aspect, you get more into that. I would almost say like industrial revolution style, where I think it does build more off of that. But again, it's combining science with magic,
right?
And that's effectively what Magitech is all about. And it's if I recall right, I believe it's the first time that they even coined the phrase Magitech is Final Fantasy VI. And it's basically this means that other things can utilize magic to a certain degree, but it's not that powerful. And that's where Terra is so different, because she has the ability to actually utilize full-blown magic. In some respects, like she's able to utilize later in her time, she can use flare, and this is a hugely powerful spell within Final Fantasy. Like it is one of the most powerful. So for her as this magic wielder that otherwise that exists in this realm or world basically of non-magic users, like let's take Edgar and Sabin as examples. They are basically two of they're brothers, but they're opposites. Edgar is basically the king, ruler, so on. I guess it's not really king, but close enough to it, of one of the neighboring countries that. I don't know why I can't remember these names of these places now. You might remember them better than I do, Damoel.
Figaro.
Thank you. if he basically leads Figaro, but he uses a lot of different technology. One of his base things is that he uses crossbows and stuff like that. He uses, I think it's the first time we see Bioblaster and a few other techniques that exist now as a commonality in Final Fantasy. But again, these are all technology based.
Mm-hmm.
And then you end up getting Sabin, and the whole lead up with this, he's a monk. And not only does he have one of the freaking coolest gameplay things and mechanics in any game in Final Fantasy, period. It's amazing. He's basically Ryu, and they carry that over into his gameplay, where you actually input different key commands,
like
a fighting game,
yeah.
exactly like a Street Fighter game, and he performs those actual commands. It's amazingly fun.
That's
But
cool.
Sabin again is a monk, and again you get this mirrored image basically between opposite image, I guess, between Sabin and Edgar, who effectively stand for the want to the same thing, like they both want peace and whatnot, but effectively they are two different sides in this coin. They're the most representative in that respect, I think.
Okay.
And yeah, like it's very strange because like people react very strongly when Terra uses magic because this world hasn't seen it in decades. Since something happened, and most people don't even know what happened exactly. They just know it all went away and technology took over.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And okay, so okay. I'm jumping back and forth so much because I have so many things that are triggering in my head from watching those
That's
videos.
Mm-hmm.
So the one character that I remember seeing his name constantly pop up is the airship captain.
Sid,
yes. Why is there always a Sid? Even if he's not an airship captain, he's a technology guy.
So there's also always a Biggs and a Wedge, or just
not always.
Biggs and a
But
Wedge.
that picks up in 6? I think they show up and then they get retconned in some of the remakes. But
6 is basically a big one that everybody knows because they're like right at the beginning. But I believe they retconned probably because we didn't get that until much later.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I think they show up in 6 first.
Yep.
But then like some other characters kind of got converted to them and stuff. So yeah. But yes, I don't think it's exactly known why Sid exists or where he came from, but he does exist from Final Fantasy II, I want to say on.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he's just omnipresent.
Yep.
And that's a weird thing about Final Fantasy, where they all have very disparate stories and very different worlds, but then these weird things that are the same, right? Like there's always a Sid, and he's always a technology wizard.
Right.
And he generally focuses on airships of some kind.
Airships or flight or something along those lines. Yeah.
Within that same marking.
Wasn't he working in the one of the castles in one of the games as the guy in charge of...
FF4 he was.
Yeah. And like he throws a fit when the king fires you, and like he's like, I'm gonna go yell at him right now.
Uh-huh.
And your character's like, no, it's fine. I'm sure he'll get over it, and we'll figure it out in the morning. But yeah. And 4 is actually the first experience for many people, because like that's the first big one, right? Because 2 and 3 didn't even make it over here.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that's the first big one that he showed up in, and then he's in 6, but only kind of briefly. He's not in that as much, but he is like really related to one of the main characters.
Our airship guy was Setzer in 6. That was our main boy.
Yeah, Sid is the engineer who kind of created Magitech, basically. In 6. So he actually has a much bigger story arc.
Which I think is kind of funny because he actually leads himself as like a more of a main villain kind of character, and I think that was one of the first times that he sort of took on the role, even if it was like unwillingly.
Yeah, it's. I mean, that's I mean, the same thing as in 4, right? He makes the airship fleet for that the king uses to oppress and murder tons of people, right? That's actually, I think, a fairly common element.
That
Well, the only thing
technology
I would
can go
argue-
badly, or
That people use this technology
Sort of, yeah,
badly.
definitely.
Yeah.
Right. Especially when we get to 7, we'll cover that for sure.
Yeah, so I think that's actually not super uncommon, but yeah.
No.
6, he's definitely responsible for kind of some atrocities that sort of appear.
Yeah.
But like he did raise one of the main characters who is very crucial to winning the whole war. So
Yeah.
yet in 1, isn't he like the Deus Ex Machina type character who swoops in at the last minute and saves you?
I mean, he does that a lot, actually.
Yeah,
like
he
a lot.
does. Definitely.
Like he does. So like he does that in 4 for sure, like 2 or 3 times, I think even. In 5, he does it at least once or twice. I don't think he does it in 6. In 7, he does it at least once, maybe twice. I don't really remember him in 9 that well. In in 10, he's involved, but I don't think he really saves you. But yeah,
a lot of times, especially in later Final Fantasies, especially like from I would say 10 and beyond, I would probably say he's more of like he's a there kind of character. He was there because Final Fantasy started having a Cid all the time. There were very few times that he would actually show up and be kind of useful. Until I would probably say like Final Fantasy 11 and 14. But again, I think that's because everything is just there.
Well, Final Fantasy 11 and 14 are more meant to be an homage to 1 through 6 than they are to the rest of the series.
Correct. Until you start talking that they incorporate Final Fantasy 13 into 14, and I just wanted to punch them in the face for that, but let's not talk about that.
Whatever. Lightning's gear looked awesome.
Yeah, that's about where it stopped.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about like the early ones because those are the ones that I kind of paid attention to when I was doing my own research. But as far as some of the later ones, going past the crazy time traveling witch funkiness that happens in that
the Final Fantasy that shall not be named,
Oh,
yes,
God.
Exactly.
They don't even let you pick your own final party.
No, they don't. It's
you have to randomize until you get one that works.
Speaking of that,
you literally it literally randomizes which characters are in the final fight every time you go in. So like, unless you wanted to power level every single character, and realistically, ain't nobody got time for that.
Right.
You just sat there and reloaded until you got a party that worked, and then you went into the final fight. Best design ever, Squaresoft.
Yeah.
So, do you want to actually talk about how that became a really big deal in some of the later ones, where you design your own party as you go? Like you have all these.
I mean, that's true from arguably 5 on.
Even
5 is different.
But how many characters were there?
Yeah, a little bit, but 5 had the job system, which is one of Final Fantasy's greatest offerings to the world, and I'm not being sarcastic. The job system is so good, and it's so.
You can be a bard.
Yep.
But yeah, because like in 5, you could build your own party because you had the job system, so your characters could do whatever you wanted. You were always using the same 4 characters, sort of, but you could make them be whatever you wanted, right? Like if you wanted, Bart's to be the healer, you could. If you wanted the badass pirate chick to be the mage, you could, right? Mm-hmm. The diminutive little princess could be the warrior. I mean, you could do whatever you wanted, and that was glorious for me. That was really transcendent because I love 2 or 4 to death, but like, and I actually think that it adds a lot to that story. That you don't control the characters, because it means that they can do things to those characters and they can put them in jeopardy and risk, and they do. I think the first time I ever cried in a video game was in Final Fantasy IV. There's this great scene where these 2 wizard kids that hated your main character but were forced to kind of accompany him to keep an eye on him, have gained so much respect and love for that character that they, like, when you're escaping from this one thing, these walls start closing in, and like, before you can even sort of react, they run over to the walls and they turn themselves into stone to hold the walls in place so that you can leave. And like, I was like, I want to say I was like 10 or 11, and I just put my controller down and cried like a baby. Like, like that was the first time I think I'd ever seen something like that in a video game, and like it meant a lot more than movies and TV shows, because like I had spent 8 hours, 6 hours with these characters, like growing to love them, listening to their antics, trading barbs with them from my character, who I definitely identified with Cecil and loved him to death. So it was really, really rough for me. And so I actually think that added a lot to it. In 6, they because you can kind of pick your own party, it's harder for them to do that. And 7 and on, it gets even more so. But you can definitely control your own party and see what characters you want. And that's actually something I think the later games sort of lost a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And it's one of my main complaints with 13, which I think was an otherwise fantastic game. It had a cool story. It was a little on rails, but it was fun. And there's a system in it where you can kind of build your own character, but for some reason characters are arbitrarily penalized if you're not doing the thing that Square wanted you to do with them.
Right.
And it basically takes 5 times as much experience. And so when that system unlocked and I saw that, I stopped playing the game. I just went and read the rest of the game because I was like, I'm not going to spend 5 times as much effort to build the party I want to build, right? I want to use the characters I like, and I want them to be the things that I like, and I couldn't do that. So I was just like, oh, I'm done.
Yep. I gotta say, I couldn't play 13. I thought it was absolutely despicable, and I just put it down and said, not even touching you.
The story was reasonably interesting, and I didn't end as well as I would have liked, but I thought the beginning premise was cool, and the characterization was pretty alright. But yeah,
I almost feel like some of the tie-in games had a better feeling than 13 did.
13
also.
13 definitely, the 2 sequels were better built games. The only thing I liked about 13 was I really liked the sort of rapid fire switching of roles during fights was really neat. Yeah. And I thought it led to some really cool fight design, actually. Because there were boss fights where you were very clearly intended, this phase you want everybody doing damage, and then this phase you kind of you need a tank to sort of protect the team and absorb damage. And I thought that led to some very cool fights, but again, you needed those roles, and if you didn't want to use the characters. So.
I think my biggest problem and tieback with Final Fantasy 13, if nothing else, since we're on the topic, is just that it felt like a poorly written FF6 to a fair degree. The largest thing is that you have these l'Cie that are, in some regard, somewhat relatable to Espers in a way, and you effectively start to see the way that they're all put together, the way that all these characters are put together, and the only ones that have decent voice acting, you wish you could hear more of, which is one big problem. But that is another problem that I had with Final Fantasy 13 because it was one of the games that actually had near full voice acting. Final Fantasy 10 had some, but 13 had a lot of it, and it really took a lot of the imagination away. So I think that was one of my biggest problems and complaints with that game, too.
Okay. So there have been, 15 main titles, and then
so there's been 13 main titles and 2 MMOs that use the same numbering system, which are very different. Okay.
Which are the last, say, let's go past the one that shall not be named. Which one? Yeah, you've got me doing it now. Which one is your favorite and why for the later ones?
I think Final Fantasy X is actually probably my favorite Final Fantasy. It has some pretty cool twists. I think it exemplifies a lot of the core Final Fantasy elements in solid ways. I will admit that some of the voice acting does detract from it, and some of the choices on how the characters are portrayed further detract from it.
Do you want me to do the Titus laugh?
But overall, there's a lot of great elements, and the twist at the end is something I actually didn't see coming, and I almost always can predict what's going on in Final Fantasy. And because we're basically hip deep in spoilers, the neat thing about that story is that when you hit the end of that story, they pull the "it was all a dream" thing, but it's not the story that was a dream; it's your main character.
What?
No.
Basically.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
So basically, this civilization sort of locked itself in a loop. They basically brought about their own destruction and kind of locked themselves in a loop. And then this religion formed around them that kind of kept exemplifying that loop. And through sacrifice. And like as you go through the story, the characters realize that they don't want to keep propagating this. They don't want to keep punishing people and keep ruining lives, because like basically one of the people that stops it literally has to become the big villain.
Okay.
And so you basically, instead of healing Toe and continuing this cycle, you rebel and go off and fight the cycle and try to end it permanently. And it turns out that your character is literally like a figment of this alternate, of this world that was, and these people that are sort of trapped in this thing. And it's sort of their like last wish to sort of end the big thing, the big horrifying apocalypse that they sort of started. And so like when the story ends, your character just kind of fades away because like, you know, it's all done. It's all ended. And I thought that was my mind was blown pretty heavily when that happened.
Okay.
And that's where Oron comes in. He's sort of an assistant in this rebellion, and he's from the same sort of era. And he basically goes in and pulls you out of that dream, so that you can, you know, kind of complete this thing and end the cycle.
Right.
What about you, Beard?
If it has to be any of the ones later, then it probably would be either 9 or 10. But I would probably lean honestly more towards 10 if I'm being fair. A lot of the same reasons, though. I think that it was one of those stories that I could sit down and kind of agree with a lot of where the topics are going, how it was kind of placed, so on. The gameplay was also fun. The story, again, had all those twists and turns. I kind of liked what they did with a lot of the female cast in a way, too, or at least most of them. A lot of them weren't necessarily the little prissy girls the whole time, which they really set up a lot of times.
Right.
They were a little stronger. Especially Lulu. I definitely did like Lulu, and I could deal with Riku to a point.
Oh, man.
It's what they...
Oh, man.
It's,
now we're going to fight so hard.
I'm going to say now we're going to fight? Okay, that's fine. But I could not stand them, and I need to state this, I could not stand them in 10-2. And if anybody wants to bring up 10-2, then we're going to fight.
Oh, 10-2 is one of the best games ever made. It just wasn't a Final Fantasy game.
If we're going gameplay-wise...
The gameplay is fantastic. The story
is fantastic.
The story is just popcorn, right? Like, it suffers from trying to be a Final Fantasy, and in all honesty. Like, if it had just done its own thing and been its own side project, it would have been so freaking incredible. But the gameplay is... Go ahead.
I would almost say that same thing, too, with, like, 15. You know, as much as I love 15
agreed.
Gameplay and everything... I think that they should have just called it a different project and been done with it. Yeah,
it feels like they tacked the name on to sort of, exemplify and push sales more than anything else.
Right.
But yeah, I definitely think that 10-2 has a lot of redeeming elements, but very little of it is it's Final Fantasy-ishness.
Yes.
Yes. But the combat is probably the best combat system ever in Final Fantasy. It's so ridiculously fun.
I would highly agree with that.
And I want to bring up a special mention to 9, and that's that 9 is kind of a weird, aberrant game. It's not really a traditional Final Fantasy title,
right?
In that it's sort of an apology, is the way I think of it, for Final Fantasy VIII, because like. I'm not going to bag on it too much, despite the fact that I hate it. I'm like, I hate the game. I think it's terrible, but a lot of people enjoy it, and that's cool if you do. But like, it was not well received in the slightest in the Final Fantasy community. It was very divisive. It's probably the most divisive title. Some people love it, some people hate it, and so I think Final Fantasy IX was a very safe bet, apology attempt to like sort of go, hey, sorry, here's a game that's very much more in line with the old titles than even like 7 was. In fact, it directly connects to 1, and that's the only example of that in Final Fantasy.
Yep. Cool. It's the only one that actually carries on a storyline from one to the next that is a fairly named number game. That's the one thing that I do like about 9.
Yeah.
Even though they're like 15 years apart.
Correct.
Well, it's literally time travel that's involved, so it actually works out pretty well. Basically, like the base premise for 1 is like the big villain made a deal with a bunch of demons and then sort of double crosses them and like basically throws them under the bus so that you can kill them.
Yep.
And in doing so, sort of absorbs their power and breaks out of a time loop that was part of his deal, and goes back in time to sort of like start his ultimate reign of darkness.
Okay.
And like you have to throw yourself back there too to fight him, but then you sort of like get lost in obscurity thanks to it. Like basically nobody remembers what you did because it kind of all never happens, which is, you know, Final Fantasy at its core. And 9 connects to that villain, actually.
Okay. So what would you say is... Go ahead, Beard.
I feel like we're kind of dancing around what we want to talk about, which I think is 7 and tactics at this point.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because we're, we got 45 minutes left or something like that?
I don't think we've been that long. I think we got like half hour.
Right.
So 7 is incredible because 7 is the first one with a cinematic story.
Yes.
And it like that's the only way to describe it because that's the way it's built. I don't think that the story is as strong as either 4 or 6, but it is presented in a very cinematic way, and it's very, very heavy hitting in the way it impacts you because like the characters are much more real and vibrant. Just because you see cutscenes kind of for the first time, and like it's not on a cartridge, so they can push the boundaries a lot more. Right. They do something they haven't really done as much in Final Fantasy, which is they build up a character with the 100% expectation that they're going to murder that character and absolutely crush you. In my case, literally crush my PlayStation, which I picked up and threw against the wall. And then went to EB Games at the time. The next day, bought a new PlayStation and didn't stop until I got to the end. You got this little neat save crystal that you could use to create a save point. I created it right outside his room, and I spent the next 4 hours beating him repeatedly. Because I hated him so much. And I'm in fact famous in my PlayStation 4 clan because whenever I run into somebody who has his name in Crucible, I will literally camp that person until they leave.
Yeah, and
out of hatred for that character.
I don't blame you in the slightest.
In fact, the last time I literally got flame messages from the guy because like he'd be standing in the middle of 6 of his team and I would slide shotgun him and I would literally sit there and dance on his corpse while his team killed me.
So even the XXIXX.
Oh, if you've got anything that is sort of an analog to Sephiroth in your name, I'm gonna make it miserable for you.
Oh my!
I'll even tolerate Kefka more than I'll tolerate that particular giant pile.
I will tolerate Kefka more because of the way that he's put together. Sephiroth, on the other hand, it's like you just killed one of the like more interesting characters in this entire thing, and she was like the last of her race, kind of. And you effectively have no right to do so because all you are is a big bubble-blowing baby.
Yeah, and like 7 is kind of a weird story in that Sephiroth is really just a weird pawn. Like it's harder. It's like Kefka is at least a human being that you can like. I mean, he's an insane one and he's awful, but you can understand why he's doing what he's doing. Right? He's sort of like the Joker in that like you don't 100% understand why he does what he does, but you get that it, you kind of understand the core of it. Like you don't understand how somebody could get that evil, but like Sephiroth is like one of the few villains in Final Fantasy that's really backed by some sort of just absolute world destroying thing that wants the void to return. And you don't like, there's no real understanding that, right? Like why would somebody want that?
And that's the thing about 7 is that all of a sudden you think you've got it figured out where Sephiroth is like the main villain. And then all of a sudden you figure out that it very well may not be the case. Genova is realistically the entire cause for a lot of the problems that existed. And her cells are basically transplanted into all these different beings. And it carries over from project to project in Shinra, doing experiments and so on. Cloud is an example of it in a way, and his former, which is Zack, is the other one that is effectively more important to the story, I would say, to Final Fantasy than any of the others. The problem with Final Fantasy VII, if nothing else, is there's so much to it. There is before Crisis, there's after Crisis, there's Crisis Core, there's Final Fantasy VII, then there's Advent Children. So and then we are not going to talk about Dirge of Cerberus, because if I really bring that up, that's going to be a problem. But effectively, there are there's effectively all these extra arcs that exist within 7 to fully tell this tale. And that's the thing about 7, is that they never expected it was actually going to blow up the way that it did. And it was all because of one cutscene. So I will kill the suspense, because I know you've been waiting for it for a while here, Green. This cutscene involves what looks like it involves the main character, Cloud, who is basically sitting hunched over inside of the back of a truck. And then you have this other spiky-haired, he's black-haired, spiky-haired guy that's carrying around the Buster Sword, the main sword that is very signifying of Final Fantasy. Yeah, very iconic.
The one that I actually sold.
Yeah. But that's the biggest sword that everybody effectively knows from Final Fantasy. Like, if you say Final Fantasy, a lot of times people think either Cloud or they'll think Sephiroth. I would almost put money on it because of the way that they're put together. But then you see
is
this
the most
other,
recognizable, in my opinion,
with the blonde hair and everything. Yeah, everybody sees him and they're just like the guy with giant sword. That's got to be Cloud. But Zack all of a sudden comes out of this nowhere. And Zack is the guy that is effectively the actual main, I would say, protagonist of the series. Because he's the one. He's basically the one that they've built up now through the other stories that actually does everything. We'll start off as far back as I can with Crisis Core, because that's actually where his story begins. But he's basically there's a army within the main villain class, or the main villain industry company. There it is. Good grief! Why couldn't I think of that word? Within Final Fantasy VII, called Shinra. And Shinra, however you want to pronounce it, they effectively tap into the life energy of the planet. Zack is there as a soldier 3rd class, and soldier is their private security or military force that they have. He basically gets better and better. He goes up to soldier 1st class, finds out that Sephiroth, the other guy that is at the head of soldier at that point, ends up going nuts, figuring out that he was actually born from experiments of Shinra, and that is what basically leads to him needing to overthrow and try to kill Sephiroth, because he burns down this village called Nibelheim. And it just so happens that Cloud is with him. That cutscene that leads up to it is actually him getting Cloud out of Nibelheim after it is basically toasted to the ground, supposedly, and gets him back to Shinra to try to stop them from basically ruining the planet. He's the one that's effectively the cause for all of that and leads it. What gets into Cloud's head is that he's in this stupor state. And
he's basically in PTSD, basically.
Yeah. He just witnesses his hometown getting burned down. And
not just in a normal way either.
No. And he also ended up getting stabbed by Sephiroth, which, as much as we will rag on him, he is probably one of the more powerful characters in Final Fantasy, even in his human form. He is that powerful and that strong.
Because he's never fully human, too.
To begin with, yeah.
Yeah.
But he has the powers. Materia is as a side thing, Materia is the thing that grants a lot of the characters their magic capabilities. That is actually crystallized life essence of the planet. It takes a long time to form, but that's what gives people magic abilities. He's able to basically use these in different ways and so on. But again, Zack is basically getting Cloud out of there, gets back to Midgar, which is the main town that things initially kind of take place in Final Fantasy VII and the most, I would say, the better part of Disc 1. But Cloud is in, again, this stupor state. He's completely like lost. And Zack leaves him with the final words to say, "You're my living legacy." And that is what basically stays with him. And this is the silly thing about Cloud, is that he then ends up taking on the persona of Zack. But you don't fully realize this until after a portion in Disc 2, like towards the very end, and all of a sudden Cloud opens up and says, "Anything I said about any escapade I did and anything I did previously wasn't me, it was Zack."
He basically, like, in his trauma, it just imprinted on him and just completely became what he had seen from him.
Mm-hmm. He emulated him from basically.
I mean, it's an actual psychological condition. Like, it's an actual thing that happens. This isn't like, this isn't just made up for the story. Like, this is a real thing that happens, particularly in war, is a place where you'll see a lot of examples of it. You know, like when civilians are rescued or something, they'll just, like, because they're so weak in their own minds, that they will just imprint on somebody that's strong.
Mm-hmm. It's a variant of Stockholm syndrome. Yeah,
it's basically sort of the same thing. So it's very cool.
And they use this what I love about 7 so much, and why I still think it's my favorite, with the way that it kind of ties back, it is just simply that it's how to deal with loss. Everything is just this constant. It starts with Cloud in this state of, he lost his one of his best friends at that point. He either remembers it or doesn't remember it. Most likely doesn't at that point. And then Tifa is dealing with loss. Barrett is losing with loss. And you start to unravel all these different characters with the way that loss handles. And it's coping with loss. So for me, at the time 7 had come out, I had actually just lost 2 of my grandparents. So it was one of these things that started to connect back to me. And why this story was as powerful as it was simply because you started to realize how much all of these characters, as main characters, had lost.
Just about everything, realistically.
Yeah, and it all culminates to this figure of Sephiroth, where he effectively is the embodiment of that loss, or brings loss around the entirety of these characters in a lot of ways. And then just to basically get to that end point, you get to that end fight, and it's just Cloud saying, "I have to release this rage that I have." And it's also the first game they introduced, like, the limit bar. And that is the one thing that really ties back to the limit meter, is that the more that these characters get pummeled or they hit enemies and whatnot, it's like it's this introspective, this way of showing this character is building up so much frustration with everything that has happened to them. That's what I've loved about Final Fantasy, is that everything revolves around this theme of loss and coping with it. And then just to get to that ending, and the ending scene of Final Fantasy VII, I don't know how many times I sat down and watched that. It was... The cutscene was so powerful for me, just to see how it all ended that way, and then just to have that little extra push with Advent Children so many years later was just the cherry on top. The arc of Final Fantasy VII is, I would still say, one of the best arcs in gaming, but it took a while to get there.
And it's a little muddied, I think. It's the reason it doesn't transcend over 4 and 6. It is a fantastic story, and it's great, but it's muddled, and it's just not communicated as well as it could be.
Especially when you take out the main idea, and granted, it may have been pulling a George Lucas, but they had Zack as a character within the game, and everybody wanted to know more about him. All of a sudden, 3 previous prequel games spawned because of one cutscene. That is how powerful that cutscene was. Yeah. And how much people wanted to see more of this of this character called Zack. And it all came from one cutscene and him getting shot and nobody knowing why.
Well, and like, I mean, there's a bit more to it than that, right? Because like, there's some obvious ties because like, one of the other characters had a big connection with Zack,
Right.
and so like, there's a lot of like, why is he so relevant here? What's going on? And so, but yeah, I mean, he was just this big question mark, realistically, and then yeah, he spawned just a bunch of prequels and movies all sorts of stuff.
They had to actually update Advent Children a little bit more. It's for the complete edition. And I still will say, obviously, that is the best edition to watch that in. And you start to... That's where Cloud... that's the joke. Or the punchline, if you will, the whole thing. Cloud smiles. And that's actually one of the last song titles in Advent Children. Because he finally comes
song.
to... Such a good song.
Yeah.
It's the tie back basically to the ending that he's finally given. He's finally forgiven himself for everything. He doesn't feel guilty anymore. He's basically said, I am no longer the cause of these people's deaths, and I can move on. And that the ending scene of Advent Children, especially with Complete, and I sitting here kind of tearing up just even thinking about the fact that there's like, seeing Zack and this other character just walk away. It's just, it was a beautiful scene. The song, everything just kind of culminated to this very emotional send-off for Final Fantasy VII. And I will continue to say that it was definitely the best part of it. Yes. I would say that Final Fantasy VII was the one, I had said it earlier, Final Fantasy VII was the one that got me hooked. It was the one that kind of kept me going. And it is the one I can continuously come back to, probably because it has such very good childhood meaning for me, and still feel like I can play it, connect with it, and get more and more and more out of it each time I play it.
So would that be the one you would suggest for somebody who played any of the Final Fantasy, knows nothing about the games? Would you suggest that's the game they pick up?
Yes, and I would personally say it, and if not that one, then I would probably say 6. Those are the two that I would probably lean on, but I know Damoel's probably going to say something different.
So I think 6 is good if they're okay with a game, like an older presentation, right? Like, because it's not at all the same as games these days, right? So if somebody doesn't mind sort of the older retro style, then I think 6 is 100% the right answer. Because I think objectively, it's the best Final Fantasy ever made, and I just don't think it's possible to... I don't think that's ever going to change.
No.
That's when they've really started getting into better graphics for it instead of the...
Yeah, I mean, it's a Super Nintendo game, but it's still rough. Like,
right.
You can't get past it.
Right.
I love that game, but like it's old. And there's some ports that clean up the graphics a little bit, and they're fine. But like, yeah, it's still tough. I would actually say that 10, I think, if they don't like that, is probably the best one. And because as good as the story in 7 is, and as epic and wonderful as it is, in my opinion, the gameplay in 7 is not that good.
It doesn't hold up as well anymore. I would agree with that.
The materia system is kind of gimmicky. It's sort of unfortunate because it like a lot of the stuff you do in the early game actually ends up not mattering.
Yeah,
because there's some very powerful materia, and you don't get that till later. So like a lot of what you do early on literally isn't progress because you're leveling up this materia that you just don't care about.
Right.
And there are a number of materia that are so overpowered that there's no choice in whether or not to use them.
Okay.
Because objectively, there's the best choice.
And also to get a golden choke bow, but that's for another day.
Yeah. In the defense of the game, I do not know how this is going to hold up with the remake. I do not know systemically how much they're changing it, but there's a very good chance that they will be changing it. So if that changes, then maybe that's a good one to do.
Well,
but
the initial gameplay that we've at least seen of it, it's more of a, and granted we don't know about the materia system, which I know is what you kind of mean overall, but it's going to be more of like an action-oriented or somewhat action-oriented game.
Yeah.
We haven't seen full details yet, and they're just like, well, we're going to keep pushing it back now, and all of a sudden it's going to turn into your next Kingdom Hearts 3, and I'm going to really scream.
And I think 10 actually has the best progression system in a Final Fantasy, in my opinion.
Okay.
Because it's this really, so the way progression in 10 works is that there's this huge thing called the sphere grid, which is this giant board basically, and you earn points that you can spend to move along that board, and as you move along you get new abilities and new attributes. And the fun thing is that everybody's on the same board, they just start in different places. And like just sort of by playing the game, you're going to end up covering most of it. So like it actually doesn't feel bad if you want to like take a character a path that they weren't intended to be on. So that's why I think it's really solid, and I do think that the story exemplifies a lot of the better elements of Final Fantasy. I don't think it's as good as the arcs and the stuff in 7, but as we've mentioned, it also to some extent 7 requires outside stuff to get the full benefit of that, I think.
Yeah. I gotta say, if you're looking for a single sit down, then I would probably say either 10 or 6. I think they're the ones that a lot of people, in my experience, when I've recommended them, a lot of people connect with immediately. And thankfully, I'm looking at Steam right now because I forget which ones are out there. The only
almost
ones
all
that
of
really
them
aren't. Yeah, the like 1 and 2 are the only ones that are hard to come by. There's Android and iPad versions if you want to grab those. But otherwise, 3, 4 of the after years, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10-2 remaster is out there. 13, 13-2, and Lightning Returns if you want to get into the whole Nova Crystallis series. The biggest problem, more than anything, with Final Fantasy VII is, again, the fact that it stems over so many other games and media. And the problem is that good luck getting those media. Because to get before Crisis, Crisis Core, after Crisis, and that line, most of it
You're
was
pirating.
You're pirating highly, because they only released Crisis Core on PSP, the idiots, and they never decided to release it anywhere else.
Isn't it like $600 a disc now or something?
Yes, it's stupid. And the one thing I was excited for, because I had forgotten that I still had a PSP Go that was hanging around for some odd reason. I was like, hey, I'll go download Final Fantasy Crisis Core and have it at least. No,
you can get it for cheap now. I guess somebody must have released some. It's only like $10.
Changed it. Okay, that's not bad. But Square Enix never put it up digitally.
Nope.
So you couldn't download it digitally.
And these are all
you
used.
can get it with a disc.
It'll work.
Right, that's the problem. And it's a problem with PSP discs, especially. Anyway, yeah, that's the biggest issue. If you want my wholehearted answer, though, yeah. If you want my wholehearted answer, though, it's going to lead to what's being talked about right now in chat, and that's just to play Final Fantasy Tactics because it's the best thing ever.
Final Fantasy, yeah. So okay, let's go into Final Fantasy Tactics.
Oh my god, I love this game.
So we need to establish first for the audience and the people who aren't part of the know is that this game is not. It is connected to Final Fantasy. It is tied to Final Fantasy, but it's not a Final Fantasy game. It's very different. It doesn't share most of the themes. The Cid in it exists, but he's not anywhere connected to the other Cids, even a little bit. That being said, it is an incredible story.
Oh god, yeah.
Particularly once they translated it so it all made sense.
Yes.
What?
Not to be an asshole, but I played through the original one and it's almost indecipherable. Like there was when I finally played through the remake War of the Lions, there were points where I was like, "Oh my god, that's what was happening?"
Right.
Because you get most of the major arcs, right? You understand what's going on and the crazy descent into madness, but there are so many little details where you're just like, Jesus, I had no idea who you were.
Well, and especially when, really, and especially too when you start looking at Tactics, because it started Square had actually developed it with like a very ye old English kind of feel.
Oh, yeah.
There was a lot of that was in there, and it didn't translate over very well in English for the original game. The other thing that overshadows it, and a lot of people forget this, Final Fantasy VII and Tactics were released in the same year in the US, which was 1997. And that is the problem with Tactics. It got overshadowed so hard by 7. And
I mean,
that's
to
the
some
biggest
extent,
shame.
I agree, but also I think because the presentation was so rough, I don't think it necessarily would have done well.
Look, no. Let's look at marketing. Let's look at marketing for just a quick second. When you go ahead and you present a game that looks like Final Fantasy Tactics, and then you present something with full-blown cutscenes like Final Fantasy VII,
I agree. I'm just saying,
how is that going to be perceived by the public?
I agree, but what I mean is that, like, I don't think it would have done that much better with how bad the translation and stuff were.
No,
right? There was not even tutorial, right? I played that game, I started that game about 12 times before I realized that in the first mission, you could put down more than one guy on the map. Because they don't teach you that anywhere. It didn't even come with a rule book.
Nope.
So, if you didn't sort of look at the, kind of weird sort of, it had icons in the top that sort of indicates that if you hit this button, you'll switch to a different character. You had no idea. So you just, put this character down, and you're like, okay, now I'm going to go play. And you go in, and there's, 7 enemies, and they kick the ever-loving crap out of you. And you're just like, what the heck?
Well, and even worse than that is the fact that they actually have this tutorial mission, but it does say tutorial on the front of the freaking game. But it teaches you, like you said, absolutely nothing.
Yeah,
and
it's the easy beginner lesson, but it's not actually that. It doesn't do anything to make it easy. It doesn't have those little handy pop-ups. It's like, here you can add multiple characters. Swap through your characters by hitting this button.
For the longest time,
you just have to figure that out.
I was trying to figure out why I was getting my butt kicked so hard in the beginning of Tactics, simply because of, overall, I had no idea I could unlock different abilities because they never tell you that.
If I knew, somehow I knew it was a job system game, so I just assumed, and I just went in and looked. But, they don't teach you that.
Well, to set abilities was easy. To change job classes was easy. There was a menu for it. But then you actually get into abilities, and you had to get into another sub-menu in order to learn abilities.
Yeah, because
that character.
Because with Tactics, the original Tactics, you had to actually not only just equip them, you had to learn them too. Because with Advanced, with Tactics,
pretty much all of the Tactics. But that's you had to learn them and then choose which ones you wanted to equip.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Because Advanced was much more. See, I kind of came in on the a reverse way. I actually learned about Final Fantasy Tactics through Tactics Advanced, and so I played. I loved Advanced because it was me.
I forgive you.
The judge system can go.
Oh God! Yes.
System.
Okay. Yes.
If you even said A2, A2 was fine because the judge system is tolerable in that.
Yeah.
The judge system in Tactics is one of the most sadistic things anyone has ever done to gamers.
It was
every time somebody looks at me and goes, "Dark Soul is so crushing." I'm like, why don't you just go play through Tactics? Why don't you just go through Tactics?
No, you want to talk about restrictions
and have this judge come in and be like, if that person uses a melee skill, they're out the fight. And you're just like, well, whatever I do now, I guess I'm just done.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, wait a minute.
You just throw your DS into the frickin' tames and you move on.
All I have is a team of frickin' nothing but monks and fencers, and I'm like, how the heck do I use anything but physical moves at that point?
It's so bad. And in A2, they moved it over from a harsh punishment to losing a reward, and that is fun. That is actually good design. Right, if you want this shiny thing, you must play by the rules. That is great.
It's put a challenge on it. This was legitimately we're going to take a character from you, and after so long, they will legitimately be put into a execution chamber and die.
Yeah, well, I mean, the last fight I did, I accidentally forgot to unequip counterattack. And I went into a fight.
No.
And my big hard hitter counterattacked and got judged. And I literally just took the card out and I threw it in the trash. And I've never gone back.
So, and this is completely counter
this game entirely.
And this is completely counter to that control that you feel with the first one, because what Tactics instilled with this idea of permanent death on a character, and it was a Fire Emblem idea, because I know that was also really big over in Japan at the time. And I know this wasn't the first game that introduced it, but long story short, after it was
popular one.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. I mean, Tactics Ogre and everything did.
One to
Shining
do it.
Force was the first.
Ogre Tactics didn't really have the same feel because like your characters were all mooks, right? You didn't sure you lost them, but they weren't like Billy Joe Bob the Knight. They were just like generic knight.
You had spent
you had some special named characters, but well, okay, so I'm going to pause here, and also because we're talking about sadistic systems, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the first Ogre Battle game that came out in America.
Oh no! Why are you doing this to me?
Which is what I'm to this day, I'm still struggling with this game intensely. So this is one of the most punishing games in the entire history of the world. So there's two endings to this game. There's a good ending and an evil ending. In order to get the good ending, you have to be a good guy. Now, normally that just means you have to kind of do good things and you go save some kittens, put out a fire to help the old lady cross the road, whatever. Not in this game. In this game, you have a thing that's called reputation, and your reputation falls whenever you do something that could even sort of peripherally be considered the neighbor to dishonorable. Yep. This includes fighting enemies who are lower level, fighting at night. Note, you have very little control over when battles happen. Very little. This includes using basically every powerful unit in the game, except for 2, which are good guys, because they're evil. So, in order to get the good ending for this, you basically have to jump through all of these abnormally awkward hoops in order to, playsate these fictional deities and be the good guy. And it is so soul-crushing. And I have been struggling with this game since it was in America. I don't remember when that was, but it's, a long time ago. To this day, and I have never finished it.
No,
I refuse to take an evil. I refuse to take an evil ending. I've been playing since 1993, so 24 years I have been trying to play this game.
Wait, no, you've been playing this one game
for 24 years, yes. And I have never beaten it.
It is that bad.
And Beard will back me up on how valid this particular strategy is.
Yes.
I want the good ending. I am going to earn the good ending, and it will happen someday.
Well, it's
Damo. I'm just gonna say this is up there with the argument of gaining light without killing people that we had. This is up there with that.
I'm glad you guys didn't push it, because I 100% would have done that.
I know.
I absolutely would have done that. And you understand now the depths of my conviction, because you doubted me before, but I think you may not doubt me now.
So what you're saying
this whole
is
conversation that we tilted over in Focus Fire chat, and it was one of our most intense and uncivil chats we've ever had. In which people 100% insisted that all Guardians were proponents of the sword logic because we killed enemies to gain light. And I was like, this is stupid, because you could theoretically hit max level, never killing a mob. And people were just this close to pushing me to do it, right? Because it is possible to level from 1 to cap in Destiny.
People being me.
And Handsome Dragon was there too.
Oh gosh.
Oh Lord.
Who's one of the people I most love having cards with, because he's quick.
Yes.
He keeps me on my toes. But because you can do it. You get cap in Destiny without killing a single enemy. And I would have done it, but nobody took the challenge. So
Damo would still be playing Destiny 1 at this point.
No, actually I did the math, and I think it would have taken me 5 or 6 solid weeks of playing.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Because I remember you were talking about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I started off in advanced. So when I went to tactics, it was this is actually
transcendent.
Yeah, well, because I was I don't have to worry about the random chocobo showing up and yelling at me.
So
he always jumped in on the damn chocobo, and he's like, "You can't do this." It's I'm going to hit you with a baseball bat. I don't know.
I want to exemplify the story of tactics for a little bit, which, when 100% properly translated, is a story of revenge, betrayal, darkness, and overcoming that darkness, such as this world has probably never seen. Let me finish real quick. And I mean, Shakespeare and everybody like that, all of those great classic authors have nothing on how deep and intricate this tale is a recreation, and cranking
And just-
to 11 of European politics.
Yes. And just to interrupt on that, how much I went off on Final Fantasy VII and started to going like full introspective and start tearing up on that one. Oh no. Tactics, I'll be worse about.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Like I as much as I talked about raging about Sephiroth, there are characters and tactics that I won't. I would rather not discuss here, and I'm thinking you'll probably feel the same way, and I think it just won't come up. But there's some real bad people in that game.
Oh my god,
the
yes.
absolute worst.
And the more you find out that it's like actually related to your like half blood and everything, you're just like, oh no! I mean,
one of the things that makes it such a story of betrayal and darkness and like corruption and power grabbing is, and I mean, Libby should definitely play through this game because he's the one who insists humanity can never be good, and this game basically confirms it. But you basically get to watch the vast majority of your family descend into Milton-esque levels of depravity and corruption. I'm 100% sure that the Lucifer of Milton would look at the family you grew up in and go, "Damn, people, you need to chill."
Yes.
Chill.
There is zero chill in the Boyles, like zero.
Not like negative chill. They reduce chill in the world by existing.
Yes.
And it's just amazing because your character's literally this, like, he just goes and grabs a, sorry.
No, it's
that
okay.
out. You're gonna, like, he just goes and he grabs a mop and a bucket, and he just cleans up after these people.
Yes.
Like, he just walks behind to them and fixes everything. And at the end of it,
but he fixes
the entire end of it, he doesn't even get credit.
No, but he
That's
also.
the point of the game. When you go in the intro, there's this scholar saying, "This is the story of this war, but it's not like you think. There was actually a hero you never knew about."
Yep.
And that's one of the things that when they translate gets about 1,000 times better because that's really poor in the initial translation, actually.
Yes.
And
especially that opening just drives me absolutely mad.
The opening's bad.
Now I want to go play it again.
I know that's
really
what this game does to you.
A lot of really crucial familial conversations are bad too.
Yeah.
Because contextualizing how intricate the family relationship is and why your character's doing a lot of what he's doing and why his family's kind of doing what it's doing just doesn't come across in the initial release as well.
Even like Wygroff or Wygroff, however you want to pronounce the name, you don't get that full conviction in what he's doing until after all is said and done, they finally translate it properly.
Yeah.
And then having everything translate over with Meliadal and everybody else is just like, how did you screw this game up?
Well, no. So the actual
Enix
question, in my opinion, is how was this game so freaking amazing when you were missing like a third of it?
Right.
That's the actual question. Because that's what happens. Like when you play the game and you have the proper translation, you just go like, wow, this game was already S+ tier. Like we're going to have to invent a new tier. Like there's just nothing to classify this game. It just doesn't exist.
No,
and,
it doesn't.
This was already one of the best games in existence. So like, what do we do now? Like maybe somebody actually sabotaged the translation because the world's just not ready. Like they're like, if we release the story,
world is not prepared.
They'll just stop eating.
Yes.
They'll just play this game till they die.
It's like if Destiny actually connected all the dots. Hey-oh.
I mean, I love Destiny. I think we all know that. I think we've all heard the arguments, but no, I can't back that. The story and tactics is better.
It's well, and I think it really I think it is one of the highest stories in pretty much any game that I've played. But you're right. I mean, it takes you have to play the full game because you don't understand a lot of the context of the first third until you're finishing the last third. Right. And I mean, but you don't get sucker punched until the end. Which that's, you
get sucker punched.
Okay, that's true.
Escalating.
Yeah, it's just the big punch.
Until
the big punch.
Where you're like, nah, it's all good. Like I can't even. I'm immune now. And then he drags you out. He drops the kryptonite right down your throat, shoves it down there, and then he just punches you in the dick until you cry. And then you just weep. You just weep with a broken soul. And then you know what you do? You put that game down. You go get a beer. You start right over.
You start right back up. And that's how you know.
I can-
And that's how you know it's a Final Fantasy game.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yes.
But I mean, like, one of the things that really does make this game so well is it really does exemplify that old style of English, European literature, because it's so epic and sweeping, and the characters are like, you really are just, it captures that feel of you're really just a guy stuck in a tempest, trying desperately to grab whatever pieces of the world you can and just hold them down, like, as much as you can. And like all throughout the story, your character's like, I got nothing. Like, I have no idea how I'm going to fix all of this, but I'm just going to keep trying and hope it all works out.
Yeah, from the first moment that you end up like losing some of the two, or you think you lose two of the closest people that are like in your life originally, and then it ends up just evolving from there, and you become a mercenary, and it's just like this doesn't have an end in the place that it should go.
Well, I mean,
and
there's
as
two
you
things.
get older and form, it just gets worse
There's
worse.
There's two fundamental elements of that game, and that's that, like, it's always going to get worse for your character until it can't get worse anymore. And I don't mean that like you hit the bottom. I mean, literally, there's nothing. There's nothing left of you to work with.
Yeah.
The theme of that game may as well be called perseverance. It's perseverance
through
against everything that is coming at you.
Yeah, and the second is just that, like, perseverance is the second one. Pretty much, you covered it. Like, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous how much fortitude that character has in the face of just losing everything over and over and over. Because like,
Ramzaboyov is a bad.
I mean, no, he is the bad. He is the high lord of bad. Like every other bad. Like the main man loves Final Fantasy Tactics. That's where he got his. That's where Lobo got his bad. Literally, that's where that came from. He played Final Fantasy Tactics, and he was like, "This guy is all right. I'm going to emulate this guy." Before that, he was a wreck. He was head over heels in love with a girl.
The other really cool thing for me was when I was playing Final Fantasy Tactics was and this was kind of, Beard, you were talking about like the love of story. This is actually one of the games that really got me hooked into the connections between reality and games. Because, I mean, I know you guys know about the connection between the War of the Lions and the,
Oh, I mean, like,
the War of the Roses. The War of the Roses, which is actually a historical thing. And I mean, you think that the War of Lions is this horrible thing. I mean, no, this is actually based I don't know.
I mean, it's
how
cranked up to 11 and they add demons, but like,
it's the demon piece, like, but the events,
but I mean, like, the events were pretty accurate. And zoom back out. Yeah, I'm going to pause and zoom back out a little bit and show, like, this is a theme that Squaresoft is really heavily into. They really, I don't want to say they like to persecute, but they definitely like to draw into the spotlight and try to make you think about things in a lot of ways. And a lot of that's European history, and a lot of that's also religion. Xenogears, which I brought up earlier.
That's right.
Oh, God.
Is a very large discussion of religion. And at the end, when we're all done, I want to tell Green the story of Xenogears so I can watch her head explode live on Twitch stream. Because the freaking twists in that are so huge and metaphysical, it's just ridiculous.
We talked about Final Fantasy for, the majority of this, and realistically, no. Final Fantasy Tactics and Xenogears, those are the two stories that I would say overall are encompassing of when I was a kid growing up, which absolutely blew my mind, and I had no idea where to go from there. I needed more and more and more of that. And the fact that Square Enix didn't deliver as they ended up merging afterwards was just the most disappointing thing in the world.
Yeah. Though I don't know how you could build a sequel off of Tactics.
You actually could kind of... I have thought about this left and right, just to basically introduce Auron into the tale and have him try to correct everything.
Oh my God, that would be a cluster.
And then all of a sudden, everything just starts to happen again. Like he starts digging too far, and it brings up this entire rush. And all of a sudden, it's now not that Ramza's been betrayed this entire time, or the whole entire team has been betrayed this entire time. Now it's history and life has been betrayed. Take that sucker punch to the gut.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, they just do things that they would never do in anything else. Like, I mean, they're there are ambiguous characters to the level. Like Final Fantasy tends to like to keep things at least like to the outer edges of gray, right? Mostly it's pretty black and white, but it's not in tactics.
No.
Outside of your character and two other characters I think I can think of off the top of my head, like everybody is muddy, everybody's soul is a little bit black, everybody's dark, and even like Thunder God Sid, who's a pretty alright dude, is not above reproach. Ramza is 100% above reproach in every way, shape, and form, and I will take umbrage to anybody who disagrees with it.
But wasn't
his sister's pretty alright too. And Agrius is pretty alright too. Delita has some darkness, not as much as everybody else. But
okay, that's right. Because she, okay. Never mind.
Delita does some things that are not of the angels. Delita was not of the angels. I mean, Delita was a good guy, but that's one of the things I'm saying. Like, Delita is a character that would never exist under any circumstances in any other Final Fantasy game. It just would never happen. Like, they would never have somebody that twisted and gray.
No. Considering how many ways you're like, is he good? Is he bad? Is he good? Is he bad? You never would get that. Yes, exactly. You would never get that in like storytelling today, I would argue. Like,
it's pretty rare. Some games do that sort of thing, but it's very rare. But I mean,
poorly executed in comparison to Delita. For God's sake.
Mostly. There's been some good ones, but yeah.
All right.
I might love the game too much.
Well, I mean, and yeah, I think if you guys. I'll kind of start wrapping this up because we're bumping up against the 2-hour mark that we normally.
Do you want me to do the Xenogears synopsis on the thing, or should we do that after? It won't take too terribly long.
Green, how are you? How is your head able to handle another explosion?
So Xenogears starts with a very interesting cinematic in which you're on a spaceship flying through space, and some background that doesn't come up until much later, and I don't even think comes up in the game, is that there's humanity built a supercomputer. They pulled an extra dimensional creature in to power it, and it was kind of intended to serve as a weapon of war that would win all wars for humanity. They decided that it was too powerful and too willful, so they kind of ship it off into the void to, like, I think throw it into a black hole or something.
Correct.
Obviously, this machine is not happy about this. It kind of wakes up, even despite it wasn't supposed to, and starts taking over the ship. There's a pretty heart-wrenching scene in which the captain's kind of sitting there waiting for everybody to evacuate, looking at a picture of his family, and across the screen in front of him, it repeats the words just, "I am the Alpha and the Omega," which people will probably reference or recognize the reference. And then the ship explodes. The next thing you know, you wake up on the planet and you're this guy, and you're kind of living in this village, and it's all primitive, and like it doesn't seem to connect to the sci-fi at all. And you go through and you find out that there's all this kind of tech that's crashed on the planet. Like there's these giant mechs that people fight in, and like, you know, some people live like with windmills and water mills and grain, and some people have some technology. It all boils down to that machine. That machine basically crashed onto the planet and decided that it needed to get off and defend itself. So it sort of empowered one human and created another out of its sort of existential life force, the extraplanar thing, and then used its own DNA to create humanity, so that humanity could eventually progress to the point where they could create starships in order to get it off this planet so it could continue whatever it wanted to do in space. And your character and another one that you run into are the reincarnations of those two that sort of were tied to the machine's power. And you go through, like, you like find out all these memories from your past lives. You find out that this religion that exists on the planet is actually just this like whole system of control. It's basically like kind of a government masquerading as a religion, and you like take that all apart, and you show up and like, I mean, I'm glossing over a lot of the complete mind screw that happens in this game.
God, yes.
But like that's the basic premise, is that this computer created the whole race of humanity on this planet in order to escape.
Yep.
Like it's amazing. It's an amazing story. And I've spoiled a bit of it for you, but it's still worth playing, because like even knowing that, it doesn't matter. There's just
I want to ask a question. I want to ask
Added,
questions, but I don't want to add time.
But
Well,
hey,
let's wind down and then we can.
Damo, is the answer 42? Did they ask? Did they ask?
I would say that in this case, this machine would probably eat the answer 42 and make it a million.
Yes.
So, like, one of the greatest strategies of this game is that the creator desperately wanted to do a trilogy, and it was like this was just supposed to, like, as deep and intricate as the story was, it was just supposed to be the first leg.
Oh god!
And sadly, that never came to fruition. We got kind of a pale approximation in a different way, but it's one of the great tragedies of gaming. Like, I think if that had come out and finished, it would have been.
They tried with Xenosaga so hard.
That's what I mean.
They had nothing that they could do to stand up against what they did. Years. It was
because they lost a lot of the team too,
yes,
and like there was a lot of
problem. Like
there was a lot of developer pressure to make it.
The design team was gone. You didn't have realistically any of the real full backing. You had a lot of the idealistic characterism that ended up fading outside of like the first one. The first one I think was the closest homage that could get there.
The first one was a good game.
Get there, but then after that, like the second and the third, it was just like forget it. Just
because most of the creative team left because the publisher was pushing them to make games that they didn't want to, and they're like, no, this isn't what we signed on to do, and they actually got out of their contracts for it because the company so desperately wanted to train wreck these games into making no money that they did that. They literally did that. They train wrecked the games into making no money, and actors left too. Like they lost a lot of actors. Most of the voice cast in the second game is actually different because some of the actors also didn't want to participate anymore.
They had no care to, none at all.
Because like characters randomly just like wildly shifted in the first one. I didn't even finish the second one. Like I think I played through a third of it, and I was just like, this isn't even connecting to the first one. Like this is the most egregious use of naming something to exploit it that I've ever seen.
Yes.
Well, on that note,
yeah, let's
now that Green is gonna kill all of us.
Probably just me,
or probably just you. Okay, well, we'll let you take one for the team. What about final comments or shout outs? Beard, what do you have any for us?
I mean, shout outs for this week. It's basically just honestly, it's to anybody that's trying to stay up during Destiny 2's launch longer than me because you're absolutely crazy. For one thing,
probably.
But secondly, no, definitely, I would say at this point, and that's saying that have you listened to me?
Yeah.
Do you know how I talk?
You in this round.
I'm kind of crazy. Yeah. Anyway, but for my buddy Grindhead Jim has been hard at it for the last few weeks now. He's just been growing steadily and realistically. I think he's one of them that has a lot of things that go against him. Especially with like internet connection, everything like that definitely he fights against all the time. So I gotta definitely give a shout out to him for like what he's been doing. But seriously, if you are gaming that heavily, especially with Destiny 2, do not forget to take breaks, get up, walk around, get water, go to the bathroom, whatever. Please don't die like anybody in EverQuest did back in the day. Those horror stories are terrible.
Oh,
I mean, better than some of the Japanese MMO stories.
That's fair. Korean ones are worse though too.
Those are both bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
First time I read one of those murder stories, I was like, "That's a joke, right?" No, that seriously happened.
No, that was it happened. Some of the worst ones have been like the StarCraft ones. Anyway, I'm gonna start getting to those stories. Carry on.
All right, Damo. What about you?
I want to give a shout out to Handsome Dragon. Actually, I mentioned him earlier, but I want to give a shout out to him for the charity stream, the Lore Minds charity stream that he did.
Yeah.
And, it was fantastic. It went off well. I had a blast on it, and I want to thank him for working hard and hurting all those cats to make that happen. So,
Mm-hmm.
All right,
Definitely.
Green.
My shout out actually goes to GameStop, and actually,
I quit.
Yeah. Oh, I know. No. Here's why. You guys know I just moved. To Colorado from Kansas. Did you know that if you do a pre-order in a different GameStop store, they won't automatically transfer to the new store because of the franchising thing?
Mm-hmm.
Because I got a limited edition, it made it even harder for them too. But Laura, the store manager at my local GameStop, worked for the last 2 weeks to get me a limited edition copy that I was able to take home last night, and I left GameStop at 10:05. I was on my way home to load. So
I will definitely accept your shout out to Laura.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. I would say I would give it to Laura, not to GameStop. And I will
Okay.
tell you that one from experience.
Not
for
to
sure.
literally the devil incarnate that tried to put
Yes,
you
really.
out of business.
They quit that. They quit that practice. If you remember, did you read that about the cycle of life for the what?
Actually, I
I mean,
as
they
somebody
still
that-
do it.
as somebody that worked for them for 5 years, it had been going on a lot longer than
Oh
that.
yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah.
But I mean, isn't that? Yeah, we're not going to get into the news.
No,
It's just the secondary
practice still
market, and the way,
exists.
it's just the secondary market, and the way they push it is like it doesn't matter as much now because of Kickstarters and Steam, but like it made it very tough on indie companies.
Oh, yeah, it did.
Early on because it was nigh impossible for them to make money because like a third of their sales ended up being used sales that they didn't actually make any money for, and that's
Right.
that's my issue with GameStop. I
Absolutely.
know a lot of people enjoy them; they like the company, but I cannot abide that. So.
fair enough.
Well, my shout outs are both to our guests. Thank you so much for taking time out of Destiny 2 gameplay to come and jump on stream. I'm glad that you guys took a break. And
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm in patrol. I have been full stream.
You devious son of a.
And I also just wanted to remind people our next extra lore topic is going to be about the DC universe. We're going to try to. I don't know how we're going to do that one, but we're going to try it. And so if you have any...
We're going to focus on the overall elements of the universe, the characterizations of the more important characters, and the quintessential elements of what makes DC, DC.
Yeah, that's actually kind of pretty close to what Green and I were talking was like really big picture. What is going on? What makes DC DC as compared to Marvel or any of the other indie titles out there?
The other comic title. Yeah, and
New 52 or no?
no.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
Preview
but
for
that's
next week.
But
Red Hood and the Outlaws was pretty good.
What I'm saying is, if you guys have any emails for that extra lore series, be sure to let us have those in our email, or you can reach out to us over on the Discord server or on Twitter, whichever one's easiest for you. But with all that, let's run through the outro real quick before Green.
One second.
Yes.
If you want to get into like deeper topics when it comes to the DC universe, we actually have a pretty active chat right now. I would want to say it's one of the more active ones we've had in a while as far as going in depth with a lot of different characters and plot points in the history of it. So if you like DC comics or are even interested in it or want to know about the history of like the comic, what is it? The Comics Alliance or whatever?
Comic Code.
Jump into chat because it's been a little psycho in a good way.
But I would say even beyond this month, our comic chat is very good and one of our better and more consistent things. So if people listen but they don't participate in the Discord, I highly recommend if you have an interest in comics, get in there.
Yeah. Do it.
All right, you guys good?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Go. With that, we'll begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those over on Twitch for coming to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us for the live streaming of the episodes, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. Links to all our other sites can also be found with our episode archives over on www.focusfirechat.com. Thank you again, Damo and Beard, for jumping into the chat. We really appreciate having you, and I'll be sure to get links to you both in our show notes for anyone who wants to continue chatting with either one of you. Please be sure to email us at focusfirechat@gmail.com with any feedback or questions for our team concerning the podcast, and let us know how we're doing by giving us some feedback over on iTunes. Reminder that we do try to stream a recap of the month-long Extra Lore conversations in the first week of each month. But if we have any variations, we always make sure to let everyone know through our Twitter account @FocusFireChat. Also, be sure to check out our partner podcast within the Guardian Radio Network over on theguardiansofdestiny.com. So, until next time, focus your fire and may your light shine bright.